Mike, are you scared of the cyber world?
I'm scared of things like Terminator 2, where AI starts to create robots, and the robots are our friends initially, and then they decide that they don't like us, and then they decide that they're going to take over, and we have to shoot nuclear missiles at them, and eventually we have to wait for Arnold Schwarzenegger to come save the day. But other than that, I'm not scared at all.
I look at it as like Wall-E, right? You know, you figure as advanced as Wall-E was, he would have had a voice better than just that, digitized speak and spell voice that they gave him.
Right. At least he had the song from Hello Dolly, right?
Exactly. Well, we're going to dive into cybersecurity today. We have Rick Howard, who's going to be our guest. And Rick, his journey through the military onto leading cybersecurity across a lot of different verticals is fascinating. Plus, I actually get the opportunity to work with Rick in the new year with the Cybersecurity Canon. We're going to dive into that and so much more. So, Mike, when we come back, we're going to have Rick Howard. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by someone who's not only a leader in cybersecurity field, but also a driving force behind an initiative that helps shape the conversation around cybersecurity knowledge. Our guest is Rick Howard, the president of the Cybersecurity Canon. Think of it as the Hall of Fame for cybersecurity books, the cyber Pulitzer, if you will. Rick's career spans decades of service in both military and civilian cybersecurity roles.
Are you saying I'm old, JD? Is that what you're getting
to? He might be known for being the chief security officer at Palo Alto Networks, where he was responsible for the company's global security strategy, and currently at N2K, formerly CyberVista. His stints as CISO or leading security at VeriSign, Cyberwire, and others, advisory positions with Tidal Cyber, Cyware, Center for Internet Security, and more, plus teaching at Carnegie Mellon University in their CISO executive program. He's also spent a significant portion of his career in the U.S. Army, where he gained invaluable experience in cyber operations. Now, as the president of the Cybersecurity Canon, he's dedicated to identifying and promoting the best resources in cybersecurity, helping professionals and organizations stay informed and ahead of the curve. And in addition to his work at the Canon, he's an accomplished speaker, author, educator, and committed to advancing the understanding of cybersecurity. Rick, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh my God, that was a lot. Jeez, I'm sorry I had to go through all that. Well, thank you for having me. I love coming on this show. Okay.
So I want to start, and we talk origins here at C-Level Up. Your career spans both military and civilian sectors. How did your experience in the U.S. Army shape your approach to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I did 30 years in the Army, and I was always interested in computers, mostly because I was a gamer. All right, I wanted to learn how to play games. I still play games as we go. My game of choice is Fortnite. I love getting on every night and killing 7-year-olds in Fortnite. Okay.
When you were younger, though, what was your gaming system? What were you into?
The one that really hooked me was Doom. You guys familiar with the Doom story, right? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Doom and Wolfenstein was out at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of that was just magic to me. Right. So, but interested in gaming, interested in graphics. Okay. Which got me into computers. So when I joined the Army, I joined the Signal Corps, which is a communications arm of the Army, which I figured was going to be tied to computers in some way. And I was right. So in that 30-year career, I did tactical networks out in the field for U.S. Army, and then eventually moved to Garrison and ran Garrison networks, which eventually led to securing those networks because we were just making that stuff up as we were going. And my last job in the U.S. Army I was the commander of the Army's Computer Emergency Response Team. And I got to, this is early 2000s. And like I said, we didn't really know what we were doing, but My job was to coordinate offensive and defensive operations across all the forces, which was an amazing job.
I have a question regarding that. I was reading something about the Cyber Threat Alliance, and can you talk about what an adversarial playbook is exactly?
Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves, right? Ever since I've started, the industry, the profession, has been interested in the technical things that could go wrong. We're interested in the malware or the exploitation code. But in my mind, and it was instilled in me early on in my Army career, we shouldn't be trying to defeat the technical tools. Our ultimate goal should be to defeat the adversary. What does the adversary do when they try to compromise a victim? And it turns out that there are multiple things an adversary has to do to be successful. They just don't have to send in a piece of malware. They have to execute a number of steps across this very famous idea called the intrusion kill chain, right? And they have to get every one of those things correct before if they're going to be successful. We, as the defender, we only have to be successful once at some spot on that kill chain. If we can prevent the adversary from crossing over, then we've defeated that operation. So when we say adversary playbooks, that is every step that an adversary has to take across the intrusion kill chain to be successful. And depending on how complicated the adversary campaign is, that can be anywhere from 30 steps to 500 steps, and we know, by the way, the good news is we know most of this. Okay. It's all in the open space. If you follow MITRE, and they have this platform called the MITRE Attack Framework that pretty much tracks most adversary playbooks across the kill chain. All right. Where we have failed, and I think in the industry, is being able to take that intelligence and transform it into actual defensive configurations for whatever security stack we've deployed in our own environments. That was a lot. I'm sorry I went off my rabbit hole that way. Okay.
No, that's great. And 30 years ago, you had a long career in the Army, but the role of a CISO didn't really exist.
No.
for corporations. It's really evolved. Talk to me about being a leader in a role that didn't exist for so long, but how do you lead as a security leader today?
Yeah, it's really different. All right. And what happened in those early days, we're talking about the 90s now, right? Like you said, the first CISO didn't come to existence until like 1995, right? But there were lots of people thinking about cybersecurity, and they were mostly the technicians, the Unix people, the router people, the firewall people. Okay. And those folks rose to the top and eventually chose they wanted the career of management as opposed to being a technician. And so the first CISOs in the world from, say, 1995 until about 2010 mostly came from the technical ranks. They had no business experience, and they were used to running around the hallway saying, "Oh my God, this technical thing is happening right now. If we don't fix it right now, the world's going to end." And that didn't happen very often. Okay, so we quickly lost credibility with the C-suite. So in those early days, I'm talking about late 1990s, those CISOs were on the executive staff. But over time, we lost that credibility, and the CISO position kept getting pushed down in the hierarchy. And most times now, the CISOs either work for the CIO or they're a peer to them, and they're usually buried 2 or 3 levels deep in the organization. You rarely find a CISO that's on the executive staff. And that is my fault. That is my peers and my fault for not learning the ways of business earlier than we are right now. The CISOs are going to be successful going forward from today are business leaders. They know how to transform cyber risk into business risk, and they can have those business decisions with senior leaders. Whereas my generation, we struggle with that my whole career.
What type of regulations and security will we need to fight the AI robots that will come after us like Terminator 2?
Well, I'm in the minority here. Okay. Most people, when they talk to business, they have a standard story that we've been telling them since the late 1990s, right? That We need to pay attention to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? But I will tell you, after 30 years of doing that, that hasn't stopped the bad guys, right? It just hasn't, right? So that is a failed strategy. I'm not saying they're bad ideas. I'm just saying they're not the ultimate idea, right? So if I want to go up to my bosses, my senior leadership, and say, here's the threat to AI in the future, I need a different approach. I can use those things, but I need something more atomic, more like a first principle. And I've been thinking about these idea of cybersecurity first principles for about a decade now, and I finally published a book on it because I think it's so important. Because when I get in front of a crowd and ask any InfoSec, a crowd of InfoSec professionals, what do they think the most important thing they are doing with their InfoSec program? I'm likely going to get 1,000 different answers, and it probably shouldn't be that. We should all be seeking the same answer, right? And so let me tell you what I think the ultimate cybersecurity first principle is. It is reduce the probability of material impact to our organization due to a cyber event in some, say, 1 to 3 years, right? And that sounds like a Twitter line, but it's pretty complex. And there's 3 pieces to it, all right? The first piece is probability, reduce the probability. That implies that you know what the current probability of a material event is to your organization. And we have to be able to calculate that, which we suck at in our InfoSec profession. The second one is you focus on materiality, right? Not everything else. If the cafeteria menu gets exfiltrated to the command and control server in Tajikistan, maybe that's not that important. Okay. All right. But if you get, if we get the recipe for Coke stolen, maybe that's a material event, and we should think about it in those terms. And then the last piece is bound it by time. Is your organization going to get hit by a cyber attack sometime in the future? Yeah, likely. Okay. 100 years from now, you're probably going to get hit. But will you be materially impacted in, say, the next year, the next business cycle? We can calculate that probability and give leadership ways to make decisions about which direction they want to go.
So speaking of leadership, you teach at Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah.
And how do you teach something that's changing so quickly, so rapidly?
Yeah, I think my main point in those seminars, and they are mind-bending seminars, right? The Carnegie Mellon University course is usually about 80 to 100 CISOs or CISO wannabes, all right, who want to be CISOs in the future. And they are getting hit not only by me, but by a raft of cybersecurity experts hitting them from all sides. What I try to instill in when I do my piece of it is they need to be open-minded about changing, right? Because, the industry is only 30 years old. And we may not have got everything right when we started thinking about how to do this stuff back in those days. Consider yourself like the Wright brothers and First Flight. We are 30 years into this, and we maybe not have all the answers. So all those best practices that you think I would challenge them, all right? And bring it all back to whatever you're doing should buy down risk for your organization. Because if it doesn't, then you're wasting resources. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never had an infinite budget to do anything. So you need to be able to be very particular about how you spend your resources. Everything should buy down risk.
So I was watching the movie Sneakers the other day with my
I
son.
love Sneakers.
Yeah, it's great, and he hadn't seen it before, and I thought he'd get a kick out of it. Are there companies that are paid to break into other companies to learn how to not break into, or how to protect yourself from those sort of things?
Yeah, I mean, back when that movie was made, it was kind of oh my God, there's companies that really do this. But no, it's a standard business out there that many companies can engage with, right? And there's various types, all right? There is turn them loose on your network like they did in the movie and let them do whatever they want, okay? And that's one way to do it. But a better way probably is to pick a very specific thing. Like this year, I tried to improve this element of my security. So we call these people red teamers, right? Red teamers come in, okay, for this little section, see if you can find anything that we left undone, right? And that would give you a better impact to that engagement. And by the way, you can use that information to calculate your risk further. All right. So that's how I would do it. So, but to answer your question, Mike, yeah, that kind of stuff's going around for years, right? And it's expanding. It's not just cyber anymore. There's what we would call these folks commercial intelligence companies who help legal firms track down all kinds of things just by using their cyber sleuths. And I hate to say this, but in other countries, they may bend the law a little bit to figure out what's actually going on, because they're working for a client that has big bucks and they need to find out information. So yes, those kinds of companies exist in the world.
Last question before our break, because you're president of the Cybersecurity Canon. Full disclosure, I'm involved with the organization and will be more so in 2025 and beyond. The Canon, it's an incredible resource for cybersecurity professionals. Talk to me about the mission behind that. You've been running it, 14 years now?
Yeah.
Why are you so passionate about curating the best resources for the industry, for these leaders?
Well, one of the things I've learned in my career is that in order for us to stay current in all the changing things in our industry, we have to be these gigantic learning animals. You have to be learning something new almost every day, every week, right? And the problem, though, is that the industry publishes, volumes of things that we should consume. We're talking about podcasts, we're talking about books, we're talking about LinkedIn essays, and anything, and that doesn't even count all the stuff we get from vendors. So the problem is there's way too much information to consume it. And by the way, none of us has enough time to do it all. So if we're going to spend time to read a book, let's say, we hope it's a good one, right? And not waste our time on that, right? So that was my big problem, 10 years ago when I was the CSO at Palo Alto Networks. So I decided that we should come up with a group of people that would kind of triage what's out there and say, out of all the books that were published last year, these are the two that are worth considering. We, like you said, JD, okay, we call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for cybersecurity books. So I called all my friends. I got about 20 of them in the initial year and said, you guys read the books and we'll decide which ones are the best ones. And so for 10 years later, now we're at the point where we're ready to expand and make it even bigger. We turned it into a nonprofit this summer so we can bring some money in and expand. It's the reason JD's coming on to help us with the project, right? And the idea is to identify the first source for things that you are trying to learn about. And if you think you know something, we want you to go to the Canon webpage and verify that you know it. Or if you're trying to learn something new, your first source of information should be what we talk about from the Canon project.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to dive more into the Canon for sure. We're going to put you through the ringer, some rapid fire questions from Mike. We're going to do that right after the break. All right. The moment everybody always waits for, Kreisel's Corner, rapid fire questions from Mike. Mike, I throw it over to you.
Okay, Rick, here we go. Rapid fire cybersecurity mistaken definitions. Spyware. Who was the best James Bond?
Oh my God, Daniel Craig. Okay, without a doubt, Daniel Craig. I love that guy, right? And I love all the Bond guys, and I realize that may not be popular these days, but I think Daniel Craig really hit it out of the park.
Spoofing. What is your favorite spoof movie?
Spoof movie? Oh my God. Well, I'm going to bring out the old favorite, War Games. Okay. War Games is one of my all-time favorite cybersecurity movies. It still holds up today. Matthew Broderick is the main character, right? And he plays the main hacker character in there. And yes, he does a couple of spoofing things to be successful in that movie.
Here's another mistaken definition from me. Cryptography. Is cryptocurrency a worthy investment?
Oh, Mama always told me, Mike, to never invest in anything you don't understand, all right? And I don't understand it. I understand how the tech works, like the blockchain. I get it, all right? But blockchain seems like a big gambling opportunity, and I suck at gambling, so I do not put my money there.
All right, the next definition, hashing. Do you prefer corned beef hash or hash browns?
Hash brown. Hash browns and a second helping, please.
Now moving on to fishing. What is the biggest fish you ever caught?
When I was 10 years old, my dad took us, the entire family, out on the Sacramento River on a houseboat. And we caught the biggest catfish that you could ever find. And he wouldn't let us eat them. He wouldn't let us feed us breakfast until we caught them, cleaned them, and cooked them. So by the time we ate them, we were ravished, or famished, right? And so those were the best catfish ever.
All right, moving on to hacking. Musician Bob Dylan was known for lifting lyrics, melodies, and techniques from people around him. Was Bob Dylan a hack?
Absolutely, he was. And there's two definitions of hackers in the InfoSec world. There's the good hacker who figures stuff out, and then there's the bad hacker that steals stuff from us. And everybody I know that's worth their salt takes the best ideas from their people they admire and use them in their own stuff. So my hat is off to Mr. Dylan.
And finally, Firewall. Firewall, starring Nick Cage, is the true story of a farmer in Des Moines. True story of a former Des Moines firefighter who became a cybersecurity specialist who prevents an army of tractors from attacking the Iowa Cubbies. Is this a real movie, true or false?
It is false, all right. But because there is a movie called Firewall with Harrison Ford that is also not worth watching. So I don't recommend it, right?
Excellent. Well, you survived Kreisel's Corner.
Man, that was tough. Thank you for going to my deep well of knowledge of cybersecurity movies. Okay, I appreciate that.
Well, and you went War Games, and I love War Games. My favorite movie as a kid. I was also thinking about Spies Like Us.
Spies Like Us. It's funny you guys mentioned that. A friend of mine and I did a really scientific research paper where we asked all our friends and relatives what their favorite cybersecurity movie was, right? And the results we got back, it depended on how old you were, right? So if you were a certain age, you liked War Games. If you were a different age, you liked The Matrix. And if you're a third age, you like spy games, right? So it just depends.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to get back to the canon real quick because you talk about trying to, as a leader, curate all of this stuff, right? All of these books. Talk to me about the process for selecting books and resources for the canon. And are there any standout resources you personally recommend today?
Yeah, the committee, as I say, it's about 20 people every year, depending on how busy people are, and we bring in new people all the time. And thank the old people who have to leave and have a life like you, Mike, right? That have to actually make money. Okay, those folks are free to choose whatever books they think are going to be good, right? And then what happens is they write a book review that tries to put the book into one of three categories, right? And the first and most important category is Hall of Fame material, meaning this book is a book that everybody in the InfoSec profession should read. And if they don't, they probably have a hole in their education. So you might, as you can guess, we don't have a lot of those. I think in the 10 years we've done this, there's about 40 books in the Hall of Fame right now that are still, every one of those you should have read by now because it will enhance your education. The second category is niche, meaning it's a great book if you're interested in the topic, but maybe not everybody has to read that one, all right? But like there might be a book on AI right now, and not every CISO in the world needs it, but somebody will be interested in it. And the third and probably most important category is do not read, right? Because there are lots of crap cybersecurity books out there. And like I said at the beginning, if you're going to choose to read a book this year, maybe not read a bad one. So before you decide, okay, go to our webpage and see if anybody's written about that particular book, and we'll give you advice on how to proceed. And then what happens every year at the end of the year, we just did it for the 2025 year, the committee gets together and has a 2-hour session where we argue about all the books we've considered. And then at the very end, we vote on which books to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, which we just did a couple of days ago. So I love doing that. It's a lot of fun. Some of the smartest people in the world are in that committee, and it is a rousing discussion.
Rick, I have a question about Edward Snowden.
Mm-hmm.
Was he a whistleblower? Was he a traitor? Was he something in between or something else? What do you think?
It's so funny you mentioned that. In my career, I've done a lot of CISO dinners where we get around a room and we just talk about stuff. And I had to facilitate the conversation. And whenever, this is when, right after he did it back in 2014, whenever the conversation lagged or I thought people were getting bored, I just dropped this hand grenade on the table. Snowden, traitor or hero? Discuss, right? And that always got the crowd going. My own personal belief that I thought Snowden was a hero. Okay, he did commit. What do you call it? He broke the law in several places, but without him doing what he did, we would never have known any of that stuff. And many of the things, if you're following all that, the U.S. government should probably not been involved in. All right, so I think he was a hero, but I'd be willing to entertain your discussion.
Well, there's already movies out, and there'll be plenty more movies out
Sure.
About his journey. For sure. You know, as a leader in cybersecurity today, what scares the pants off you?
There's nothing that scares the pants off me too much, right? I think everything we can handle, but the thing I'm worried about most in the industry is how we convey cyber risk to leadership so they can make the proper decisions. I don't think we've given them the right framework so they can evaluate whether or not the latest Chinese attacks on the telecom industry is as important as the ransomware that just happened to some big casino. It just all, when you throw it all into the big news stew, it all seems equally important and equally scary. But I don't think it is. And we don't have the language right now to convey to the leadership how to think about that stuff.
How do you prioritize security incidents, like based on severity? Is there, or are there DEFCON levels to these sort of things?
There's definitely a way to escalate, right? And so let me paint a picture for you, right? In a medium to large size organization, there's some group of individuals that we might call the SOC, the Security Operations Center. And it may not be all in one spot. It's probably very virtual these days. But at some point, something suspicious will flow into the Security Operations Center and people start to evaluate it, okay? And then most of that stuff gets thrown off to the side and said, this isn't important. But if they do discover something that they haven't really resolved it and it looks scary, it gets escalated to the next level, like a DEFCON level. And most organizations worth their salt have a way to progress through the severity of all that. At certain point, okay, that incident gets pushed out to the business leadership. It's no longer just a technical thing we are looking at, but now the company's crisis action plan gets started, right? And we start to evaluate how important it was. And there may be several steps involved in that before we actually consider it important. So yes, there is an escalation. Most organizations worth their salt have one, and they practice it all the time.
What advice do you have for someone looking to start in a career like this? Again, you teach people who are interested, but other than you're never going to sleep again because you always are going to have one eye open, what advice do you give?
Well, I will tell you that the skill that you will benefit the most from is not being technical or having a business degree from Harvard. The thing that's always been the best for me is to be able to to have the skill to explain really difficult things to difficult people in a language they can understand, right? And you have to simplify, you have to round off the corners. They don't need 20 pages of technical detail, but you have to explain it in a way that they can understand it so they can make decisions with. And I always give newbies a homework assignment when they look at me, when I tell them that, like I have a horn growing out of my head. Here's the homework that you should do. There's a really famous paper in the InfoSec community written by Lockheed Martin researchers called the intrusion kill chain model, okay? It's about 20 pages. It's not that technical. And here's the homework. Summarize it in half a page so that your grandma can understand what the hell that is. And if you can do that, you have a career in cybersecurity, right? Because that's what you need to be able to do almost every day.
Mark Zuckerberg created Face Smash pre-Facebook by hacking into the Harvard database, and he got photos of female students, kind of rated them hot or not. and put it on this site. Should he have gone to jail for that? And if he did it now, would he go to jail for it?
I think, well, as a college student, I think he would have been canceled. Okay, I think the Harvard Society or whatever all those students are, they may have protected him. I don't know. Okay, back when he did it, it wasn't illegal. There wasn't any laws that get it. I don't think. Okay, it would have been very hard to prosecute. It didn't really, there wasn't any crime involved. But today, everybody looks at that and goes, that's just kind of skeezy, and maybe we shouldn't allow that to happen.
Rick, final question for you. And again, thank you for sitting through some of our fun and diving in for the listeners out there. As the president of the Canon, talk to me about the vision of growth going forward. You guys are a nonprofit, so donations always welcome, I'm sure. Talk to me about the vision for growth.
Yeah, we've been a kind of a volunteer book club for 10 years, right? That's how we've operated. So we never had any way to bring any money in, and therefore we didn't have any way to market ourselves or to expand our reach and to even pay for infrastructure like, web pages and improvements to presenting the book reviews and whatever else we want to do. All right. So the vision is bring a little bit. We don't need a lot of money, just a little bit to pay for infrastructure and, maintain a website and maybe some programming support. But to expand our reach so that the entire InfoSec community is aware that we are the first source for curated InfoSec content, right? And so that's what we're going for. So at the end of 5 years, when we are wildly successful, we will be, like you said, JD, we will be the Pulitzer Prize for cybersecurity or the Nobel Prize for cybersecurity. Everybody will know about us, and we will be the first stop for their education journey.
Wonderful. Rick, thank you so much for educating us in this world, and good luck on the Canon.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Mike, I have to say, War Games is still one of my favorite movies. I have to show it to my kids. They haven't seen it yet.
Rick has some solid movie experience connected to his job, which I love. I really appreciate that he likes the movie Sneakers, because that's one of my favorite ones. We didn't talk about Swordfish, which is just an awful, awful movie, mainly because of John Travolta's facial hair. It's so bizarre. But good thing we have people like Rick protecting us from cyber villains like Soul Patch.
Right, exactly. Well, I haven't seen Sneakers. I got to have that on my list. There's a ton others that I still need to see as well. But Rick gave us a nice roadmap of movies to follow. So big thank you to Rick for being on the show. If you want to listen to past episodes of Sea Level Up, you can go to jamesdwayne.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.